Welcome to True Crime Threads, where we unravel shocking stories of love, betrayal, and chilling truths. In today's case, a sheriff's wife uncovers a dark secret just 24 hours after saying "I do," leading to a tragic and deadly twist. When Maria and Sheriff Gregory Tate exchanged vows, it seemed like a dream come true. Their wedding was the highlight of the year in their small southern town, a community where everyone knew everyone, and secrets were hard to keep. Maria, with her striking beauty and an air of mystery, had captivated Gregory from the moment they met. Gregory, a lawman 15 years her senior, was a pillar of the community, respected, admired, and trusted by all. To the townsfolk, their union was a picture-perfect match, the radiant young bride and the stalwart protector of justice. The ceremony itself was straight out of a storybook. The church, adorned with white roses and soft candlelight, echoed with the sound of their vows. Maria wore a flowing ivory gown that shimmered with each step she took, her eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and nerves. Gregory, in his neatly pressed uniform, looked every bit the proud and devoted husband. Their first kiss as man and wife drew cheers from the gathered crowd, many of whom whispered about how lucky Gregory was to have found such a captivating partner. The reception was equally grand, held at the town's historic hall. Laughter and music filled the air as guests toasted to the couple's happiness. Gregory was the picture of pride, his arm wrapped tightly around Maria, his gaze never leaving her. Maria smiled and laughed with ease, yet there was a flicker of something unspoken in her eyes, something that only the most observant might have noticed. When the festivities ended, the couple departed for their honeymoon, leaving a trail of cheers and confetti in their wake. Gregory had planned a surprise for Maria, a secluded cabin nestled deep in the woods, far from the bustle of town. It was a place he had lovingly renovated, pouring hours into crafting it into a cozy retreat. The cabin was small but charming, with warm wooden interiors, a stone fireplace, and large windows that framed the dense forest beyond. Maria gasped when they arrived, her surprise genuine, though her smile carried a hint of something more, perhaps apprehension. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the couple shared their first evening as husband and wife. Gregory cooked dinner, his attempts at domesticity endearing to Maria. They sat by the fire, sipping wine and talking about their plans for the future. Gregory spoke of wanting to start a family, of building a life together that would make their love story the envy of the town. Maria nodded along, but her thoughts were elsewhere. In the quiet hours of the night, as Gregory slept soundly beside her, Maria found herself unable to rest. She stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. The wedding ring on her finger felt heavy, its weight unfamiliar and almost suffocating. For months she had tried to convince herself that Gregory was her perfect match, a kind, stable man who could provide the life she had always dreamed of. Yet something about their whirlwind romance nagged at her. Gregory had swept her off her feet, but he had also been oddly guarded about his past. Maria's unease grew as the hours ticked by. She glanced at Gregory, his face peaceful in sleep, and felt a pang of guilt. He had done nothing to warrant her doubts, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than met the eye. As the fire crackled softly in the background, Maria made a silent vow to herself she would uncover the truth about her new husband, no matter what it took. The morning after their wedding, Gregory left the cabin early, eager to fulfill his duties as the town's sheriff. He kissed Maria goodbye, his demeanor cheerful and affectionate, promising to return later in the afternoon. Maria watched him drive away, standing by the window with her coffee in hand, feeling a strange mix of relief and unease. Alone in the cabin, the silence pressed down on her like a weight. She wandered through the space Gregory had prepared so meticulously for their honeymoon, admiring the attention to detail but unable to shake the growing sense of discomfort. As she moved from room to room, Maria's curiosity began to simmer. She realized just how little she knew about Gregory's life outside of what he had chosen to share. He had always been kind and protective, but there were moments when his silence about his past seemed deliberate. A faint unease stirred within her, pushing her to explore. Entering his study, Maria noticed how neatly everything was arranged. The desk, with its polished surface, held a few unremarkable items: a notebook, pens, and a small framed photo of the two of them taken during their engagement. Yet her attention was drawn to a locked drawer on the right-hand side. The more she stared at it, the more her curiosity grew. She debated whether to leave it alone, but a growing sense of urgency took hold. Maria fetched a hairpin from her pocket, a skill from her youth resurfacing as she worked the lock. The drawer clicked open, revealing a bundle of documents and photographs tucked inside. Maria's heart raced as she sifted through the contents, a creeping unease settling over her. The first photograph stopped her cold. It was of Gregory with a woman who looked strikingly similar to her. The resemblance was uncanny, from the shape of her face to the dark waves of her hair. Turning the photo over, Maria saw a date scribbled on the back 6 months prior. Her mind spun. 6 months ago, Gregory had been courting her. Why had he been photographed with another woman so recently? She dug deeper, uncovering letters addressed to Gregory. They were written by the same woman, Cassandra, describing a relationship that had been anything but smooth. The tone of the letters was desperate, with mentions of arguments and Cassandra's plans to leave town. As Maria pieced the information together, her blood ran cold. This woman wasn't just similar to her, she was her half-sister, a sibling Maria hadn't seen in years. Maria's hands trembled as she pulled out the final item, a missing persons report. Her heart sank further as she read the name on the report, Cassandra. She had vanished 2 months ago, with Gregory listed as the person who had filed the report. The date on the document didn't match his story of how he had spent that time. The realization hit Maria like a tidal wave. Gregory had known Cassandra, had been involved with her in some capacity, and hadn't mentioned a word of it. Questions swirled in her mind. Why had he concealed this connection? Why had Cassandra disappeared? Maria felt as if the ground beneath her was crumbling. Sitting on the floor of the study, surrounded by the damning evidence, Maria's unease turned to dread. She had married a man who had secrets tied directly to her family. The carefully constructed image of Gregory as a devoted husband began to crack, revealing something much darker underneath. Her instincts told her that this discovery was just the beginning, and whatever lay ahead would change everything. Maria's mind spiraled as she sat in the study, surrounded by the troubling contents of Gregory's locked drawer. The realization that her husband had been involved with Cassandra, her half-sister, left her feeling trapped and betrayed. She couldn't fathom why Gregory had hidden this part of his life, and her thoughts raced with possibilities. What had happened to Cassandra? Why had Gregory not told her about their connection, and why had her sister vanished without a trace just months ago? As the hours passed, Maria's unease deepened. She replayed the months of her whirlwind romance with Gregory, now viewing them through a lens of suspicion. His charm and persistence, which had once felt endearing, now seemed calculated. The gifts, the rushed proposal, and his reluctance to discuss his past all took on a sinister tone. It was as though Gregory had been weaving a web, and Maria had unknowingly walked right into it. Needing answers, Maria decided to dig deeper. She knew she couldn't confront Gregory without more information. After securing the documents back in the drawer and locking it, she made an excuse to leave the cabin, telling Gregory she needed to pick up a few things from town. He didn't question her, his demeanor calm and collected, which only heightened her anxiety. In town, Maria went to the sheriff's office. She knew that public records might hold clues to Gregory's past, and she needed to act quickly before her absence raised suspicion. Using the office's computer, she searched through old case files and police reports. What she found made her blood run cold. Nearly 10 years ago, Gregory had been investigated in the disappearance of his first wife, Emily. The case had garnered significant attention at the time, as Emily had vanished under mysterious circumstances. Gregory had claimed she left voluntarily after an argument, but the evidence had been inconclusive. The case was eventually closed due to lack of proof, but rumors and whispers had lingered in the community for years. Maria leaned back in her chair, her hands trembling. 2 disappearances, Emily and Cassandra, both connected to Gregory. She couldn't ignore the pattern. The man she had just married, The man she thought she knew was now shrouded in darkness. Maria's next stop was the local archives, where she combed through old newspapers. She found articles that painted a picture of Gregory's life before her. His reputation as a steadfast and loyal sheriff had helped him weather the storm of suspicion after Emily's disappearance. Friends and colleagues had vouched for his character, and over time the town seemed to forget the unresolved case. Returning to the cabin, Maria felt a knot of fear tightening in her chest. Gregory was waiting for her, greeting her with the same warm smile she had once found comforting. Now it felt hollow, almost predatory. She managed to keep her composure, acting as though nothing was amiss, but her mind raced with plans. That evening, Maria struggled to sleep. She lay awake, her thoughts consumed by the discoveries she had made. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but she couldn't yet see the full picture. All she knew was that Gregory was hiding something, and whatever it was far more dangerous than she had imagined. Maria resolved to keep digging. She couldn't confront Gregory without proof, but she also couldn't let him suspect that she was onto him. Every moment in the cabin felt like a game of survival, and Maria knew that one wrong move could cost her everything. She was no longer just a newlywed enjoying her honeymoon, she was a woman fighting to uncover the truth before it was too late. Maria awoke to a cold, overcast morning, the kind that seemed to seep into her bones. She felt a weight pressing down on her chest, a combination of fear and urgency. The discoveries of the previous day had left her shaken, but she knew there was no room for hesitation now. Gregory's secrets weren't just troubling, they were dangerous. She needed to act quickly and carefully. While Gregory was occupied with errands in town, Maria took the opportunity to continue her search for answers. She returned to the study, her eyes scanning the room for anything she might have missed during her first investigation. This time she focused on the shelves lining the walls. Among the rows of neatly arranged books, she noticed one that seemed slightly out of place, a leather-bound journal with no title on the spine. Maria's pulse quickened as she pulled it down and opened it. Inside were handwritten entries, each one in Gregory's meticulous script. At first glance, the journal appeared to be nothing more than a collection of personal reflections and notes about his work as sheriff. But as Maria flipped through the pages, she began to notice patterns. Certain entries were marked with dates that coincided with significant events in Gregory's life: the disappearance of his first wife, Emily, and Cassandra's vanishing. The entries about Emily were chillingly detached, describing their arguments and her growing unhappiness in the months before she went missing. Gregory wrote about her as though she were an inconvenience, a problem he needed to solve. When Maria reached the entries about Cassandra, her heart sank. Gregory described meeting her by chance at a community event, where her resemblance to Maria had caught his attention. He wrote about their brief relationship, how he had been drawn to her but quickly grew frustrated with her defiance. The final entry about Cassandra was dated just days before her disappearance. Gregory mentioned a heated argument, his anger spilling onto the page in sharp, slanted handwriting. Maria's hands trembled as she closed the journal and placed it back on the shelf, ensuring it looked untouched. She felt as though she had uncovered a side of Gregory that few had ever seen: a calculating and controlling man who viewed people as obstacles to be managed. With each revelation, Maria's determination grew. She couldn't stay silent, couldn't ignore the mounting evidence that Gregory was hiding something sinister. She knew she had to involve the authorities, but the thought of turning him in was fraught with danger. Gregory was the sheriff, a man with influence and connections in their small town. If he suspected her of working against him, he wouldn't hesitate to retaliate. As the day wore on, Maria began to formulate a plan. She would gather as much evidence as she could and leave the cabin under the guise of visiting a friend. Once she was safely away, she would contact an investigator outside of Gregory's jurisdiction, someone who could take her claims seriously without tipping him off. That evening, as they shared dinner by the fire, Maria struggled to maintain her composure. Gregory seemed relaxed, oblivious to her inner turmoil. He spoke about their future, about the life he envisioned for them, but his words only deepened her resolve. Maria nodded and smiled in all the right places, but inside she was bracing herself for what was to come. She knew the risks of confronting a man like Gregory. He had spent years cultivating an image of respectability, and she was about to tear it down. But Maria also knew she had no choice. The truth about Gregory and whatever had happened to Cassandra and Emily was too important to ignore. The man she had married was not the man she thought he was, and now she had to find a way to escape his grasp before it was too late. Maria knew she was running out of time. Each moment spent in the cabin with Gregory felt like a dangerous gamble. Her plan to gather more evidence and escape unnoticed was becoming increasingly urgent. The weight of what she had discovered, Gregory's connection to both Cassandra and Emily, the disturbing entries in his journal, and the pattern of disappearances left her with no doubt that she was in grave danger. The next morning, Maria made an excuse to visit the local market. Gregory didn't seem suspicious, giving her a kiss on the cheek and reminding her to be back in time for dinner. Her heart pounded as she drove away, but she kept her expression neutral, determined not to tip him off. Instead of heading to the market, Maria drove to a neighboring town where Gregory's influence would be weaker. She parked in an out-of-the-way lot and entered the local police station. Nervously, she asked to speak to someone in private, refusing to divulge details at the front desk. Soon, she was seated across from Detective Caroline Morris, a seasoned investigator with a sharp eye. Maria laid everything out, starting from her discovery of the photographs and letters to the journal entries and Gregory's troubling past. She handed over the photocopies she had secretly made of the most incriminating documents, her voice trembling as she recounted her fears. The detective listened intently, her expression shifting from curiosity to grave concern. Detective Morris assured Maria that her claims would be investigated immediately, but she also warned her to be cautious. Gregory was not only a sheriff but a man with a reputation for being meticulous and controlling. If he suspected Maria was turning against him, he might act unpredictably. Maria nodded, her resolve firm. She knew the risks but was determined to see this through. Returning to the cabin that afternoon, Maria did her best to appear calm. Gregory greeted her warmly, seemingly unaware of her covert trip. She helped him prepare dinner, their conversation light and unremarkable. But beneath the surface, Maria was hyper-aware of every word, every glance, every movement. She couldn't shake the feeling that Gregory was beginning to sense her unease. That night, as Gregory slept, Maria prepared to make her final move. She packed a small bag with essentials, careful not to disturb anything that might give away her intentions. Her plan was to slip away under the cover of darkness, drive to a safe location, and wait for word from Detective Morris. As she reached for the door, a creak in the floorboard made her freeze. She turned slowly to find Gregory standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. For a moment, they stared at each other, the tension in the room suffocating. "You're up late," Gregory said, his voice calm but laced with suspicion. Maria forced a smile, making a weak excuse about needing fresh air. Gregory nodded but didn't move, his eyes narrowing slightly. The next moments unfolded in a blur. Maria's instincts screamed at her to run, but Gregory's imposing presence made it clear that escape wouldn't come easily. She thought of Cassandra, of Emily, and of the life she had narrowly avoided losing. Summoning every ounce of courage, Maria bolted toward the door. Gregory lunged, but Maria was faster. She dashed into the night, her heart pounding as she raced to her car. She could hear Gregory shouting behind her, his voice echoing in the dark, but she didn't look back. The engine roared to life and she sped away, her hands trembling on the wheel. Maria drove straight to the police station where Detective Morris and her team were waiting. Within hours, Gregory was taken into custody, his carefully constructed facade shattered. The evidence Maria had provided was enough to reopen both Cassandra's and Emily's cases, and Gregory's sinister double life unraveled under the scrutiny of the law. Though the road ahead was fraught with challenges, Maria felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had escaped the nightmare and uncovered the truth, ensuring that Gregory could never hurt anyone again.